Hi, Mike Kelly. My affiliation is Mike Kelly. So I wanted, Chuck, to get to a little bit of the data that you showed, and I don't know if this is about next steps exactly, but it was on the slide about cognitive control and adiposity, I think it was, and it was like a lot of human subject data that I've seen in many areas with a straight line showing the relationship and then a shotgun with many pellets surrounding that. And so I got two impressions. I wanted to ask you to reflect more on it. And one impression was, well, the relationship is there, the straight line, and then there's a huge amount of individual variation. And so it sounded like what your research was pointing toward was improving physical fitness could improve cognitive control, but that all of these children still need to be treated as individuals. I wondered if that was even a thought, or if you could comment on that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Individual differences is certainly a big part of human subjects' work. It's difficult in that the vast majority of the field is really sort of looked at differences in mean tendency. And I think what you're noting is sort of the variability around that mean. I did show you a slide that's recent data we've been working on where overweight and obese children show greater variability in their responses. So from trial to trial, they're more variable than healthy weight kids. And we published data several years ago showing that higher fit have less variability than lower fit. So the other way, that lower fit are more variable in their responses than higher fit. And so beyond that, we don't have much more, we haven't made much more headway in terms of sort of individualizing programs, but certainly that's something that is discussed from time to time.
Alexandra Jenkins, GI Labs in St. Michael's Hospital, Toronto. This is probably a naive question, but how does the DPA story work in people who are vegetarian, who are vegans? We know that these diets have advantages in chronic disease reductions and longevity and so on. Do we know anything about the mental state, depression incidence and things like that in these kind of populations? It always puzzles me. How do they survive without the DPA?
So, I hope that I understood properly your question. So the question was about vegetarian and vegan. Actually, having only precursors from plants can be okay, except if you have a deficit in the enzymes. And so there are some data showing that FADS2 there are some genetic deficiency in this gene, and then it could be a problem because then you don't metabolize properly the precursors into long chain, and it concerns both omega-6 and omega-3, and then it could lead to deficit. But to my knowledge, it has not been really well studied, this relationship. It's just that it
the
could
conversion
be
rate is minimal.
It's minimal, but it seems to be sufficient for the brain.
So why do we have to push fish? That's I'm worried about our fish stocks.
But yeah, but when you get old and or if you have a high demand or if you have a poor nutrition, then it could be problematic.
Hi, Alan Preston, University of Puerto Rico. I'm going to be a little less scientific and maybe more pertinent to the general public. And we see on TV a lot of ads that say we need minimal amount of exercise, but we have to do it at a very high intensity. I'd like to get your comment on that one. And the other one is, like, instead of just doing one exercise, something like CrossFit will give better results. Can we comment on that?
Yeah, I can comment on that, particularly as a member of the Physical Activity Guidelines Committee for Americans for 2018. Those are not the U.S. guidelines. The U.S. guidelines for children are moderate to vigorous physical activity delivered on an intermittent basis for a minimum of 60 minutes a day. For older adults, adults in general and older adults, the recommendation is 45 minutes or so, 40 to 45 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity most days of the week. Moderate to vigorous physical activity can be accomplished through a brisk walk. It does not require CrossFit. And in fact, CrossFit has come under fire for its high injury rate, and so it's not recommended for all people, but certainly those that are trained. And I know there's probably a subset of people maybe in this room who swear by it, but I can tell you that the military does not allow their soldiers to engage in CrossFit because of the injury rate. So with the new guidelines coming out, I don't know. We only make recommendations, but my understanding, or at least what we've discussed a bit at this point, so don't hold me to it, is that the guidelines will probably increase a little bit. So you'll see adults go to about an hour most days of the week, but that moderate to vigorous intensity is going to stay. So hope that helps.
Hi, Josh Miller, Rutgers University. I wanted to comment on what Dr. Johnson was talking about with the meta-analyses and dementia and Alzheimer's disease. One of the things that we've been seeing is meta-analyses that are making conclusions that there's no benefit of nutritional interventions, particularly, say, B vitamins. And the problem we see in those studies is that they are extrapolating way beyond what the data is suggesting. And there's some key points. One is if you're going to have a control group, you need a control group that's actually declining in cognitive function. And a lot of the studies pick control groups that get placebo that aren't declining, and then they show no effect of the intervention because there was no effect to effect. And so the second thing is, the second point being that you really need to study, particularly in this age of only 5-year limits on funding, you need to study the people who are actually declining, and that would be the mild cognitive impairment people. If you study them too early, you won't see anything, and if you study them too late when they have Alzheimer's, you can't expect nutrients to work miracles under those situations. So you really need to focus on the MCI folks in these in intervention studies before we can make any judgments on the guidelines.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like just to add that for vegetarians, algae is a good source of DHA also.
Question to you, Dr. Johnson, and a more statement. I cannot agree more with disastrous expectation about research, well, actually more research about Alzheimer's disease incidents that we will face in the next 20 years. And even to make it worse, I'm sure you are aware that the attrition rate of any kind of clinical trial that has been conducted in the last 20 years is about 0.6. It means that 200 and more than 50 clinical trials failed for more than 90%. So the question is that or we are actually looking at the wrong target, or actually we have not quite understood exactly what is the pathophysiology of the disease. One question that going directly to you and also to Dr. Hillman is also the fact that we need to keep in mind that Alzheimer's disease, well, actually the higher risk for Alzheimer's disease, which is age, is something that is not a universal situation. We are very well aware of very successful ager, or actually different rate of progression of the disease. And now I'm going to the specific question that relates to Dr. Hillman, is the fact that in the last few years there has been a lot of interest on what is the concept of the cognitive reserve. We think about that many people would eventually delay the onset of the disease, or maybe they are not encountering the disease just because of this concept of cognitive reserve, which is in some way, well, for what I understood, a kind of increased kind of a resilience against the disease. Now, imaging study demonstrate that when a subject goes to his own doctor, is going to say, I have some problem, most likely the kind of problem of cognitive impairment is nothing else than the reflection of something that initiated probably 30, 40 years before. And there are imaging studies that actually support this kind of event. You didn't bring up even potential factors such as predisposition due to genetic factor like the ApoE4, which actually is a very important factor for especially for the old onset of Alzheimer's disease. So going back to the specific question, to the main point, if we develop an intervention, if we think about to develop an intervention that could be nutritional, or physical activity, or cognitive stimulation that everybody is talking about in these days, when should we start? We have evidence, even in let's say, young as well as young adult, that there is still time to initiate some potential preventative initiative. Is this something that can be done? And in your knowledge, but this is actually the neurobiological basis of a cognitive reserve that we can target possibly with this lifestyle, with this modifying lifestyle factor that could be the diet, could be the exercise, as well as also cognitive stimulation.
Yeah, thanks for that question and a little bit of the lesson. You know, I don't disagree. I mean, I think that cognitive reserve is certainly a topic that is widely discussed. I think the problem with the literature is that it widely discusses cognitive reserve a little too late, right? And so we talk about cognitive reserve in older adults, and we don't talk about cognitive reserve in kids. And so, you know, you brought up ApoE. You know, we know that that different alleles in ApoE, relate to Alzheimer's disease. But if you look at the literature and the imaging literature, or not, just the cognitive literature in general, all that's done in adults. There hasn't yet been a study in kids where they've genotyped them to look at whether or not they're showing markers, cognitive markers of deficit at a young age. And that's certainly something that could be easily done. It could be easily applied. Sample sizes tend to be a little on the small side in most of the literature, and that would have to be beefed up. But that aside, the field just hasn't moved in that direction yet. We do have a new grant from the NIH. It's a pretty hefty grant, looking at 650 older adults, 65 to 80, that do not have mild cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's disease or any dementia of that nature. But we are genotyping with the goal of trying to predict future deficits and see if we can link that to cognitive markers. But again, we're doing this in 65 to 80-year-olds. We're not doing it in 6 to 8-year-olds, right? And so this is something that needs to be done, I think. It's a very good point you raised. Thank you.
Yes. Hi, thank you very much for your talks. My name is Ze Yuan. I'm a graduate student from University of California, Davis. And I have a question that any of you may answer. Yeah. So there are studies about how calorie restriction and ketogenic diet would affect brain function and neurogenesis, and many of them are showing positive results. So I want to ask if you see any possibilities of such diets in future for treating brain diseases or improve brain function.
I'm not sure that I'm qualified to answer to this question. In animal model, that's true that it works. The caloric restriction improves some cognitive deficit. In humans, I would say that what we know for sure is that diabetes, obesity, and dense energy food is bad for cognition and emotion also, mood disorders. So in this, I mean, if we decrease the amount of food we eat, probably it will help to protect the brain of the bad effect of a poor nutrition or obesity, or to prevent this. So, but I'm not sure that, in aged people, elderly, weight loss is very bad. So we shouldn't decrease the amount of food we give to elderly, because it's weight loss is very bad. So it depends, I think, to the age and to the situation.
And there's a few studies that show that intentional weight loss in overweight or obese people is associated with some cognitive benefits. But again, we just need to distinguish between intentional and unintentional.
But overall, I think that it's important to take care of the amount of calorie we eat during all our life, for sure, and to exercise. It goes with it. And also the quality of what we eat. So more than just decreasing the energy, it's more what we eat. So vitamins and omega-3, of course, but a lot of things. Protein quality also is very important. It's just not a question of amount of calorie, I think.
Thank you. Okay, one more question? Yep.
Comment.
Yep.
I think actually there is a big difference between diet restriction and calorie restriction that actually had to be kept in mind. About 20 years, 10, 15 years ago, we initiated a series of programs understanding these kind of factors, primarily in the prevention of a certain kind of neuropathological feature in Alzheimer's disease. The results are not very clear in animal model. Primarily, certain kind of caloric restriction, depending upon what kind of macronutrient you're going to try to use, that primarily is actually reduced fat, actually reduced in refined sugar in some way, can lead to certain kind of changes in ketogenic responses, which actually bypass the glucose metabolism, and then you have a certain kind of less oxidative stress and potential prevention in cognitive declines. But I never seen and never heard anything that could be nothing else that in a very interesting observational study that suggests that some of these things right now may have a benefit on cognitive function. The only study, and also I want just to bring to attention to you about all these meta-analysis studies that you brought up and all the importance of the nutrition, is that in some way we cannot conclude anything because there are no controlled study. There is only one study actually that is called the MIND study, and that is more or less the similar identical type of dietary regimen for DASH that actually is done for cardiovascular disorder. Primarily we can call them as a Mediterranean diet, which actually was a double-blind, placebo-controlled study that was conducted and showed some kind of a potential beneficial effect, but was extremely well controlled and very difficult really to conduct for obvious reason. So in general, I think is the fact, and again, I bring up the idea that 260 or more, 250 clinical trial in Alzheimer's disease they failed, have to tell us that probably we need to change route and move on something else. What we discussed today is phenomenal. It's actually extremely interesting. I'm sure you are aware all this day NIH support now with $30 million grants just to start and understand this kind of phenomena. But if we don't do it in an appropriate manner, we are not going to come up with anything except with several other anecdotal evidence that if you exercise and then you have some kind of good lifestyles and then you are cognitively stimulated, maybe you can improve your life. But there are even evidence of people that conduct a really distractful life. They smoke, they drink, they have absolutely nothing that what we discussed today, and they live longer than anybody else, such that in some way, I don't know anymore what is the answer.
I know, your points are very well taken, that we need what we heard today, the basic science of, our brain formation and neural development early in life, the kinds of interventions that we can do in young children that are early in life, where we can lay that solid foundation. And then we don't know what to do about a long latency disease, like Alzheimer's disease, and to design the kind of trials that will really get at that. And like Josh said, do the timing right. At what phase of our change in our cognition, when the pathologies maybe a little bit, but not too much. So we have a lot of work to do yet. So thank you. And thank all of you for your questions and participation today. And we thank Abbott Nutrition for their support, and our organizing team from the Nutrition Translation Risk and from ILSI North America. So thank you.